Hello everyone, it's Ty. Over the years, there have been a number of Star Rail characters on my account that have found their usefulness wane. Some whose damage types became less favored, others I simply replaced with someone better at the job. But there is one man who, through thick and thin, has somehow managed to remain unwaveringly useful. So today, I thought we'd take a look at how in the world a character released all the way back in 1.0 could somehow maintain his place as one of my most used characters even as we head into 4.3. This is an inquiry into the indefatigable Jing Yuan. Jing Yuan is a lightning erudition character, and the second limited banner character ever released following Seela. In fact, in a seemingly on-theme coincidence, the day I'm writing this just so happens to be the 3-year anniversary of his very first banner, and I swear that was not intended. From the very beginning, he was seen as good, not great, due to many of the unfortunate shortcomings of his kit. Who can forget the super awesome feeling when Lightning Lord's about to finally take his turn, only for Jing Yuan to get CC'd and that turn ending up lost? Yeah, sure, I'll just wait around another 2 decades for his turn to come back then, shall I? In any case, he was still fantastic and considered top tier. At least until there were actually other characters to compete with. As the patches went on, more characters without his problems were released, and when compared to them, he fell slowly out of favor. In spite of that, he still retained his status as good, not great. But before he could fall entirely from grace, the seemingly incidental buffing began. In 1.5, Jing Yuan got himself a new relic set. The Ash-Blazing Grand Duke was the first set to offer damage specifically for follow-up attacks in its 2-piece, and a 4-piece effect that requires a very specific follow-up attack timing in order to stack its buff. Suddenly, Jing Yuan's shortcoming, the infuriatingly slow-ass Lightning Lord, just so happened to benefit in exactly the best way from this set, and it remains his best in slot to this day. By this point, erudition as a whole was seen as something of a liability. There were very few fights that included enough enemies to warrant AoE attackers, and the damage of AoE attacks was scaled to accommodate a large number of enemies, so the damage in the 2 and 3 enemy fights of MOC was subpar. Jing Yuan managed to sidestep this problem because Lightning Lord's bounce actually preferred a low number of targets to focus all of the bounces and all of the damage. But then 1.6 introduced Pure Fiction, a new endgame mode very specifically designed with large enemy groups that erudition best benefited from. Now, not only was Jing Yuan still useful in MOC, he had an entire new endgame mode that he was specifically well suited for. Was it specifically for him? Maybe not. But that's the theme here. It just coincidentally boosted his profile. With the arrival of 2.0, an entirely new version, one would obviously think that older characters would begin to lose their effectiveness. That was definitely true, for some, but not Jing Yuan. 2.1 saw the release of Acheron, a lightning DPS of heretofore unseen strength. For all intents and purposes, she should have been the death knell of Jing Yuan, taking his spot as the top lightning DPS. But not quite. Because 2.1 and subsequent versions wanted to keep shilling for Acheron, nearly everything in the game had lightning weakness, and the endgame modes had various buffs involving ultimate usage, which Jing Yuan absolutely took great advantage of. 2.2 introduced bosses with linked health pools. The past, present, and future show, and the Great Septimus were the first encounters to use a field of multiple enemies who, by attacking any one, would reduce the collective health of them all. Of course, this wasn't explicitly for Jing Yuan, but coincidentally, another of his shortcomings, the random bounce on Lightning Lords sometimes not damaging the ideal target, was completely eliminated. every Lightning Lord bounce did damage to the boss. No more wasted damage. Add to that the fact that they both also happened to have lightning weakness, and he was amazing with these bosses. In 2.5, we would get Moza, a lightning hunt sub-DPS who also happened to buff follow-up attack damage. Yeah, okay, sure, technically Moza was probably meant for Fei Xiao, but he was still another fantastic boon for Jing Yuan, who, at this point, is an entire version and a half old. Also in 2.5 was the release of the Wondrous Banana Amusement Park, a planar set that I remain convinced was only ever intended for Jing Yuan. Its secondary effect requires a summon, and at the time, there were only 2 other characters who had summons. Topaz had no need for it, since she could take full advantage of Duran, and Lingsha didn't really need it because she's ostensibly a healer, and she doesn't scale on crit damage, so who else could this have been for? There were plenty of whispers that maybe it might be intended for version 3, with Remembrance and their summons on the way, but that never really panned out either, because Memo Sprites didn't end up gaining stats the same way in combat that summons did. So it must have been for Jing Yuan. Then in 2.7, of course, he got his biggest upgrade yet. Sunday. Sunday was basically the second coming for Jing Yuan. With an action advance that also advances Lightning Lord, buffs that last long enough to affect the Lightning Lord, and a debuff dispel that ensures that Lightning Lord will not be stopped by CC, Sunday brought Jing Yuan to a place where he could actually be considered more than just good. Obviously, Sunday wasn't designed for Jing Yuan. Well, not really. But it is tinfoil hat curious how few characters benefit from Sunday as much as Jing Yuan does. Soon after, version 3 continued this trend. Once again, the release of the new flagship characters was something that Jing Yuan was able to take full advantage of. Shilling for the Herda made AoE damage quite dominant for the whole version, and with Aglaya as lightning weakness was once again prevalent throughout all of the enemies and bosses of every subsequent patch. Quickly glossing Pastanaxa, the character designed as erudition support, even though he frankly failed at that, and Permancer Teray, who forms a super team with Jing Yuan and Sunday, that finally brings us to version 4. Where he hasn't been catered to in quite as overt a way. In fact, the Elation-heavy meta and the focus on Yao Guang's physical and Sparksy's fire has left him a little bit in the lurch in 4.0. But then in 4.1, we got Ashvale, almost literally Moza 2.0, an amazing follow-up attack sub-DPS and support who just so happens to lift Jing Yuan up once again. Admittedly, teams with him tend to feel like it's Ashvale himself doing most of the work, but it's undeniable that Jing Yuan is benefiting from 100% of Ashvale's kit. And with the introduction of Ashvale, lightning-weak enemies have started to pop up once again. So, if you've made it this far, you're probably screaming, well, that's a great cherry-picked timeline and all, Ty, but what does it mean? And that's the question, isn't it? Is Jing Yuan the dev's favorite character, destined to be elevated at every turn? Maybe Jing Yuan was the peak of an original design ethos, that characters should be improved simply by introducing mechanics to the game and not needing to modify the character directly. Or maybe it's just a fluke. Maybe Jing Yuan just happens to have been able to benefit from so many of these very specific changes over the years, and there's no intentionality in it at all. I don't actually have a definitive answer to that, so I'm sorry if you were expecting one. To my mind, these things have just been far too particular to be coincidental. But in either case, they are undeniably the reason why Jing Yuan has maintained his effectiveness for the past several years. The important question is whether these flukes or targeted buffs are all that we will ever see for him. Will he ever have a Nova Flare? His version 1 mate Sela got hers recently, but she also never benefited from a multi-year streak of incremental incidental buffs. Fantastic as he is, it would be even greater if he could stand on his own as a good character and not have to rely so much on other characters or things just coincidentally going his way. Until then, I suppose I'll just keep using him as long as things continue to keep him useful. And maybe someday I'll even manage to get his signature. After 2 years of ceaseless service, I'd say he deserves a little pampering. But what about you? How useful have you found Jing Yuan over the years? Has he consistently kept you clearing endgame, or have you put him aside for someone else? Let me know, if you'd like, in the comments. Okay, so I recognize it's entirely possible that this is a point of view unique to husbando-only players like myself, but if you've never been here before, that's kind of what I do. Also, hey, hi, welcome. To you and everyone else, thanks so much for watching. If you like this sort of thing, please like and subscribe. Maybe hit that bell if you want. Things are about to get hectic. We'll definitely be doing our free-to-play husbando recommendation for Mortonak's Blade, even if I do not believe that his kit is real. But we'll also have Starlight Billy pulls in the same week, so there might be double drop videos coming. I will see how that pans out. Anywho, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye!